What's going on, guys, and welcome back to this episode of Split Screen D&D, the place where we're attacking all things Dungeons & Dragons from both sides of the screen. My name's Tom Quinn, resident Dungeon Master here at Modern Myth.
And I'm Josh Winans, resident player character here at Modern Myth.
Well, we're going to get right into this one. This one is, I think this is going to be a great one, given the fact that a lot of what we talk about kind of ping-pongs between, let's say, the OSR space and the 5th edition space, and the subscriber base, I think, is going to have plenty to say on this topic, which is the old, I don't know how old it is, really, but certainly it's alive and well on the internet. To backstory or not to backstory, I think there are some, at least two, but I think there's probably even more distinct camps of feelings about, do you need a backstory at all? What's too much backstory? What isn't enough?
Right.
And I do think that, broadly speaking, those camps live on one side of the divide or the other. But I'll be really curious to hear your take on it, and we'll. I think that there's some consideration of ways that maybe we can do away with or lean into backstory as a tool at our table.
Yeah, for sure. But before we do that, hey, internets, how y'all doing? It's good to see you. Hey, have you hit that subscribe button yet? Because if not, you really should. And maybe the like button, and maybe comment, and maybe share it with friends. And if you want to support us directly, go to patreon.com/modernmyth. And I know I got them all.
You're welcome. So smooth.
Yeah, I'm like that's why they call me white chocolate Winans. Okay. It just got weird.
So, backstories, Mr. White Chocolate Winans. Where do you land on white chocolate? You white chocolate? Oh,
no,
you
I don't
like sweets.
I don't like sweets in general. Sorry.
Yeah,
no, I don't like any chocolate.
Where do you land on white chocolate? Anyways, let's hit up to backstory or not to, and I think let's start by framing this out a little bit, because I think, broadly speaking, I know I'm painting with very broad strokes here, but I think broadly speaking, the 5th edition, or more specifically those within the 5th edition space who are leaning into kind of the this very modern style of play, are all for a backstory. It can be a very robust backstory. In fact,
a novel unto itself.
Yeah, and I think the other side of the camp, broadly speaking, let's say in the OSR space or third party space, overall, I think the position is, I think this is a fair encapsulation of the position, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I know you guys will. Is more or less the early levels of the game are your backstory. You're a nobody when you start. You haven't done anything interesting. Your backstory starts with session 1, and you kind of earn your 5th edition level 1 once you hit level 3 or thereabouts. Now you are someone worthy of a backstory.
Gotcha.
And it all took place at the game or at the table. So I again, and correct from your position, I'd love to hear if you feel that maybe I'm drawing those lines incorrectly, but I think broadly speaking, and part of the consideration for this episode was coming off of conversations either that I've had or just discourses I've been observing on the grand old Twitter sphere and social media space. And
you crazy man.
And so it's there does seem to be a pretty firm disconnect.
Yeah. Obviously I'm more of a 5e guy than a OSR. I could see both sides. Because in 5e, when you start off, you kind of start off as already pretty. You have some salty stuff even as a level 1.
Yeah.
And I think in OSR, you really do start. I think you get like one spell you can use once a day.
Right.
I mean, that's
you definitely are more akin to a peasant or
right.
or some career some tradesman who happened to pick up a sword.
Right, exactly. So in the in the 5th edition world, that when you pick up your story, you've probably already done some. It feels like something happened. Why are you able to do these things that you can do that the regular peasant couldn't do?
Right.
So yeah, it makes sense why there's more of a backstory needed for 5e.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that broadly speaking, I think I do agree with the OSR position, or what I'm just going to call the Sans backstory position, or at least heavily minified. If the goal of that backstory is to display, the awesomeness of your character, so while I agree with that position, I think at my table, I certainly encourage. I don't discourage backstories, and in fact, I think I probably, a player that I would be a more encouraging force than discouraging force in that regard.
I was about to say, don't you almost require a backstory before like a session 0?
Well, and I wouldn't say that I require, like the campaign we're running now. We didn't do anything.
Okay.
But I will say, when I say the campaign we're running now, the other campaign that I'm running,
Right.
But I would recommend it. It just so happened that most everyone who was playing, well, not most everybody, but there were some factors at the table that it just didn't seem reasonable to try and have everybody go through, but kind of exactly what you're talking about. And for those who maybe haven't joined us since the beginning, because I know early on I touched on this in a few places, and I think this to some extent, it's a weird marriage of the two, because I really do like the characters at my table to have a backstory, in the sense that it has localized them in the world, in the sense that it has attached them to entities in the world, to conflicts in the world, but a big part of that, I think, also comes from the fact that I like to world build kind of actively as my players are doing their. I mean, I think of their backstory as their version of world building. They're building out over in this pond over here, and I'm kind of building everything out around it. But I like being able to take into account the things that you've injected into the world about your character.
Right.
I could see that grating on a DM who's already dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's and going like, well, you turned in 14 pages and 8 pages of this runs in direct conflict with, what this thing I'm already doing. I'm not ribbing you.
I think mine was all bullet points, if I recall correctly.
I think, but yours I think was the most filled out. And I think that's something that, broadly speaking, like I said, I encourage, but I don't think I need a backstory, and I don't think I encourage a backstory that is tell me about your grand exploits up to this point. I want to know, were you born into affluence? Were you born into squalor? If so, what impact did that have on you? I mean, I think the idea that everything you've done through your childhood, let's say whatever character it is, you're starting in your 20s, your 30s, what have you, you're becoming an adventurer. The idea that even the mundane things, and I say mundane, the not killing monsters and looting vaults and what have you, things that have happened in your life, tell a tremendous amount about your character. And those are the things, frankly, that I'm interested in. So that's kind of, a space that I think I have, to some extent, a foot in both camps.
Right.
I think the backstory is a super valuable tool for me as a DM wanting to world build in the way that I like to world build, which is sort of collaboratively, with the players and what they interjected. A good example being, and I know we've touched on this before, but the Civil War, which really has carved out the entire tone of at least the eastern half of Faerun. That was essentially, if not outright injected by you, completely inspired by the events that you kind of laid out in your life. And I don't know that I would have put those things in there if I had no inspiration coming from the player.
Yeah.
So, so talk with me about when you as a player are writing your backstory.
Yeah.
Are there things that you think you should be trying to accomplish? Are there things you definitely should not be trying to accomplish in that space? Like is the Sans backstory crowd right that if you start putting certain elements in, you're damaging the table by carving areas out? Talk with me just a little bit about that thought process.
Yeah. So I think things that should be a part of your, if you choose to do a backstory, I could touch on whether it's you do it period or not, is you got to, I'm speaking more to my 5e crowd, it's got to make sense. And it's got to be, I don't know. Yeah, I think just, even though we're playing in a fantasy world where fantastical things happen, it's got to have a sense of groundedness. It's got a sense of reality, especially if it depends, I guess, maybe on where you're starting off. That might be something else. If you're starting at level 13, it's different than when you're starting at level 1.
That's exactly what I was about to say, but I think you're dead on. If you're starting low level,
right,
make sure your backstory is in accordance.
Right. And I guess if you start at level 13, you might want to, you're getting into the high level D&D stuff. But if you're a level 1, and this can be hard to do in 5e, because again, you kind of start off, especially if you take like Variant Human, you already start off with a feat. A feat is a very powerful thing that shows that you have some pretty extreme background knowledge. And as a level 1, it's kind of, how do I make sense of this? It's kind of really hard to do. But if you start off as a badass, then you've already arrived.
Yeah.
Like, so for the next 11 levels, what are you just going to be like reinforcing the idea? That gets kind of boring. You're the
right.
I know, not Captain America. Captain America had growth. Who's
Captain Marvel.
See, I've never watched it. I was going to say
I'm
that, but
passing that on like fourth hand.
Yeah,
so take that with a grain of salt.
What's her freaking name? Rey Skywalker. I can vouch on that.
I also don't.
I can stand behind that. Yeah, she. Oh, God, it is
better or worse than Kenny G.
Worse.
Okay. Keep
Whereas
going.
no, Kenny G just made money, and okay, make your money, and he made scented candles and popular and whatever. But I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, Rey Skywalker walks in on the scene, zero training, and shows up Kylo Ren, who's kind of a badass, trained by Luke himself, and then. Not only that, meets Luke and shows him what's up. When Luke is one of the most the most powerful Jedi. Those of you who are Star Wars people, I'm probably wrong. I'm sorry, but he's up there. I think he could like destroy planets with his force powers. I mean, this guy was legit. And here comes a person who has no idea what they're doing and is telling him what's up. It's like, no, that's not who Luke was. And anyway, sorry, I'm going to get off that soapbox.
No, I mean, I actually think this might be one of the few like. Places you're digging your heels in where you may not get a massive like
this is
like,
the first time
this is a non-Picard moment. I don't know. Prove me wrong in the comments.
No,
but,
I feel very safe, especially with our crowd, that I'm not stepping on toes.
Now that you said that, you
I know someone's just gonna be like, I'm
safe.
gonna fight with him because I can. But so yeah, going back to our subject, if you're already starting off fantastical, you have nowhere to go, and it just doesn't make sense and doesn't feel good. You remember in 5e especially, it's a very, well, at least the version we play and that's become popular, it's very narrative driven. And how boring is that book you're reading if you're starting, if Aragorn started off as the king, no, you want to see him as Strider who grows into Aragorn,
Yeah, no, I would back that 100%. I would be curious, and I think that with your backstory, you walked this line really well. And in fact, it's manifested as something I think really important for your character. But I think the way in which your backstory is executed, some portion of it, I would say, probably crosses that line.
It did.
But you did a really good job of, and for context at home, you effectively start out as a soldier, you're conscripted at a very young age. And immediately, like right there, we're going like, he's having some real world experience from a young age. Like, so what are you starting as a 3rd, 4th level fighter? No, we're starting from level 1. So then ultimately you end up being captured. You are a slave, and you are kind of thoroughly broken. Like you are dissected, almost literally.
Yeah,
but
good old Drow.
Held as a slave by the Drow. You ultimately are really just taken apart psychologically to the point that you just cease to be person that you were. I mean,
Yep.
you can kind of remember fragments of it.
Yep.
And what I will say about, kind of being at that landing point, and ultimately you are a paladin, and kind of your salvation from that is kind of what started your bond with your goddess.
Yep.
That those sequence of events, again, a little roller coastery of kind of a power spike, and then maybe that's dropped in. But what it's manifested in at the table is that your real backstory is that you are a fractured man.
Right. I'm probably worse off at level 1 than like a peasant might. Well, I guess I have the background training, but psychologically, like if I rolled, we did it where if I rolled low on my intelligence checks, I would have a PTSD episode.
Yeah, you were still suffering from those effects, and as your bond grew with Elistray,
that went away.
That ultimately you shored that up. But what I really liked is that for all of the tangible things in your backstory that you could point at and go like, well, how's he going to be a level 1? He fought not only did he fight as infantry, he became an elite part of that infantry. How is that getting sharp? And all of those tangible things aren't the backstory. And this is really what I was getting at earlier. I think we're illustrating a lot better. The backstory is you were a very competent man through your younger years who ultimately was brought very, very low. And the story, at least in the beginning of the campaign, was finding some semblance of yourself again.
Yeah.
And it really kind of, like I said, all those little feelers attached you to the world.
Right.
So I knew that there were places and people that would be very dear to you or would be very close to a nerve. So
you could kill them.
And naturally I think I even remember going like, hey, who do you think's most important to you?
Yeah, you did literally say that to me.
Like two sessions later,
you killed him.
Like dead. No, I didn't even make a roll. Dead. No, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is it's the subtext of what's transpired in their backstory, and whereas I think yours probably walked the closest to that line, or even maybe crossed it by way of being grand or fantastical, it curved itself back.
Right.
That contrasts heavily with other people at the table who like Kat's backstory really was very mundane. I mean, it was just the struggle to survive as a young woman in
street urchin.
A street urchin trying to protect her brother in arguably the worst slum on the whole continent. I mean, just a horrible place. And then kind of, I mean, to some extent, it really revolved around, again, what would be this kind of day-to-day stuff. It wasn't manifesting in, I don't think she fought, there was no monster fought. I think she might have shivved somebody at one point. She might have, a very different experience.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was attacking literally every...
Well, that also just comes from understanding that there's a certain thing you want to do, and when we're running one-on-ones, you might as well get it.
Right.
But, I think all of that subtext really is... That's where I push back a little against the notion of like, hey, your story starts at the table. I'll also caveat that by saying that I'm also a big fan of running our backstory. So even though we have an idea of kind of who you are and where you've been,
right?
We ran independent sessions leading up to where the party met.
Right.
So to some extent, those things played out at the table,
right?
And I agree with that 100%. If it can play out at the table, better than ink on a page.
Because then it gives you the experience of like getting to know who my character is, and it gets me a chance to like feel who my character is before having the influence of everyone else at the table,
right?
Which is super beneficial.
Yeah. And so I will just say that I think from a DM standpoint, or at least from the way I think about world building and running the game, I think it's an invaluable tool. It's something I would never discourage.
Right.
But I can see when I see someone's criticism, I can see where they're coming from if someone has niched out a story that really, like you said, doesn't leave any room for growth. They're showing up as, again, I'm going to take your word for it, but they're well, it doesn't matter. Pick any character that has a more or less flatlined arc by way of their growth throughout a franchise. So
anyway, that's where movies seem to be these days. But that's another subject. But I was going to pivot a little bit because when we did a little one-shot OSR thing, and I almost took the opposite approach where because the character creator kind of gave you personality,
Right.
which was
Right.
dope. So I was just like, okay, these are the things I'm going to be. This is who I'm going to be, and I just ran with it at the table.
Right.
Stupid fun.
Yeah.
Like I
Well,
loved it.
and liberating.
Yeah. Holy crap.
You know,
yeah.
that
it was.
literally we go, hey, you want to play? Cool.
Yep.
5 minutes later, you've got your character.
God, we made 3 because you know. Oh, sorry, you gotta have your backups.
Had a few backups. Had a few standbys.
Yeah, there was Joe 2, and Joe 3. But yeah, no, and it was a lot of freaking fun.
Yeah.
Just the question is, so what are I think with 5e, and this isn't a question, this is a comment, that you are the culture or I don't know the mechanics, I don't know, but you're really supposed to, I'm trying not to, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, really connect with your character. Like you are telling this character who you're trying to make alive. You're trying to tell that story. In OSR, it feels more, at least when I played it, more like there is a character that you are controlling and you're just trying to survive. You're playing, it's a game, not a narrative story. Not saying you can't have elements of the narrative story, but it was more of a game, which I'm not against it though. Like you're saying, it was very liberating. It was very fun.
Well, I think, and I think I hope I'm classifying what the OSR perspective might be here is that I think both could be narrative experiences. One is designed to be more emergent at the table, whereas 5e, or at least modern 5e, has adopted the idea that hey, maybe we should be injecting more. We should be willing more of the narrative into space. And certainly Backstory does that.
Yeah.
Because you have already done, I mean, again, if you show up at the table not really knowing who you care about yet, what you do and don't care about, then you are a blank canvas. You can go any direction you want.
Yeah.
It's perfect for that sandboxy. It's almost the character becomes a microcosm of that sandbox. The character is an open world to be explored, rather than the character is on the main quest,
right,
or the character with a series of side quests and what have you. And I think that you certainly outlined the second edge of showing up with a backstory is and I'm surprised I'm saying this, but potentially having too developed a sense of self could be a barrier to exploring your character.
Well, it kind of feels like back to the conversation of character. Was it character building where I was like, I build my characters 1 through 20, and I have a prescribed idea, and you're more of the no, every level I want it to be a surprise. I want it to be, and it's sounding like this kind of feeling like that kind of conversation.
Yeah, I think in many regards it echoes that
mentality,
that experience. But I think you bring up a really good point that I'm going to take one step back to what we were touching on with regard to kind of adopting a character that's sort of been handed to you by dice roll and by again more of a procedural generation than a creation. You didn't have. There was no sentience in.
No,
it
told me I was a noble born. I had a lot of gold starting off. I was a noble born, but I forget all my things. It was
a
really
total jackass.
I was a total dick at the table. It's so much fun.
But someone actually just commented on a much older video. I'm trying to remember which video now. Just was making the comment kind of about that idea of they had suggested, well, if rolling right down the line is too big a culture shock coming from 5e, and they had suggested, well, basically you shift your character creation to be more 5e, allow them to move their stats around so they can kind of have some creative influence on their character. Again, I mean, to each table their own,
right?
But certainly, what I responded back with was, we really were trying to stay in the true vanilla experience. I wanted to create as much of the natural contrasts that existed between the two. But so I'll ask you this: as a character moving forward, next campaign is going to start What do you think? Would you prefer to show up at the table as a blank canvas, or would you prefer to have put something on paper? Now, that it's not to say that you haven't given some thought, just because but you haven't written any backstory, whether it be a couple sentences or a couple pages, and I've heard horror stories, a couple novels,
Right.
But where do you stand on that? I mean, do you think one of those tacks, agrees more with what you want to get out of the experience, and why? I guess is
I already because I'm one of those people who have like 4 or 5 characters just waiting to be plucked out of my.
A player character.
Oh yeah, that's what I am.
Gotcha.
So my next character that I want to play, I already have a backstory in mind. It's not fleshed out really, but I want to, because I thought, oh, that would be a cool idea. I love this kind of archetype in books and films and stuff, and I would love to experiment being that role. That would be really fun.
Well, I think you could certainly say, this is my race, this is my class, this is my archetype, any of those things, and have no backstory in mind for how that came to be.
Yeah, but
do you feel like you utilize that as a tool or lean on it as a crutch in your character creation process, or in thinking about character development, or
I don't know. I don't know if I lean on it as a crutch. I try to use it as a guide, because I'm a very mechanical based guy. So I first look at my abilities,
right,
and I build 1 through 20 or whatever, 3 through 18, whatever the campaign is. And why 3 through 18? It's not that much different than 1 through 20. Anyway, I look at where he's going and I try to make I see where he's going. Why would he be going this route? What would be happening? What are his motivations that this would make sense? So for me, because I'm such a mechanical guy, it just makes it feel real. Because it'd be weird. I don't know if it'd be weird if I just showed at the table knowing who my character was going to be at level 7 when I'm starting as level 3, and just like, okay, I'm just going to roll with it and just totally walk in a blank sheet.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think completely based on what I know about the way you like to build characters, to some extent, having an idea of your trajectory, maybe none of the details, but does seem kind of important in that design philosophy. So
yeah, that's just me though, and I see value in both camps. I think it also really depends on the system you're playing. Like OSR, I think lends more itself into, like you're saying, figuring out your character as you go. Quite honestly, do you want to get super attached to Joe 1 when you're going to be rolling Joe 2 or 3?
Right.
That kind of idea.
And that's a great segue into really kind of, and it'll probably be kind of my last real point with regard to backstory is, depending on how invested you as a player have gotten in generating a backstory, pragmatically speaking, that's a huge commitment.
Yeah.
There's something hugely liberating, in that you and 5 friends could literally decide that afternoon that you're going to start a campaign that night and just start it.
Yeah.
If all you're doing is rolling up your characters and, so in terms of kind of the running lean, there's something to be said for that process. And like I said, I think it does reinforce the philosophy of like, wait and earn your right to be a protagonist. And by the time you've earned that right, legitimately in OSR, by the time you've hit that place where you're going, okay, I think I might be the hero of this story.
Right.
You have a backstory. You look back on the things you've done and you go
already...
like, remember when we did this? Remember when we did this?
That's kind of cool.
And I will say there's something really cool about all of that being shared in experience.
Very much
so. So I do think there's a pragmatic consideration there as well. Clearly, because of this constitutes some of our hobbies, we're not exactly shy about spending time on Dungeons and Dragons on TTRPG space. Like outside of just being at the table.
Right.
But so I can see value in both.
Yeah.
Final points. I
Yeah.
think I know where I think I knew going into this where I lived, but I do have a distinct appreciation for the other half of the argument. But.
Yeah, I was about to say it's like I don't know why there's so much a line drawn in the sand. I think both ways of doing it are fine. It just depends on what you want. It depends on your system. Depends on who you are as a person and what you get out of the game. If you enjoy a backstory, have fun. I mean, there's the horror stories, reel it in, But if you're like, I had a long backstory, and I think it made sense to where he was in the end. So I think it's fine. You could just roll with it. And either way, I think it's as long as it fits the tone of the campaign and the tone of the table, is do what you want.
Yeah. On that note, this will legitimately be the last thing. I was just kind of realizing that, again, because I lean heavy into that being an encouraging force, let's say, by way of backstories. I do think I can see if I felt differently about that. That could be a major source of contention. If I've got 3 of my 5 players show up expecting that I'm going to read their 8-page backstory, and I go like,
that's a good
I don't
point.
believe in this. I don't think this is important. I mean, and now don't get me wrong. Again, the whole experience is to some extent a compromise.
Right, but I don't care about DMs or what they think.
Well, and I pretend I read most everything that's handed to me. So it's so anyways, when Ken returns to his adventures with the Rakish Rovers, Ken, that's your character's name, right? Ken.
What's funny is I was like, yeah, it's Ken. No, it's not Ken.
No, but I just think that like I said, I am realizing through a different lens how that could grate on you as a DM if you're having players who are consistently trying to, again, submit a novel, and you're just going like, I don't need that. I don't.
Well,
want,
and especially if I'm sorry, I know we're trying to wrap it up. Especially if that backstory is trying to take control of the world that you are creating, like when they overstep their bounds as player and almost become a DM.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
And again, I really have to step in someone else's shoes because I like that. Like if someone came to me and said like, I've got this whole idea for, to me, I love it.
Well, that's me asking is like, hey, can we collaborate on this? It's not me saying like, this is my backstory and you better respect it.
Well, that's true. That's true. But broadly speaking, I like collaborative world building, and I know that I may not be in the majority in feeling that way in terms of establishing the campaign setting, but no, I think I think I still live in the same camp. I do have a great appreciation for the perspective of, hey, just everyone show up and let's just get after it, and let's let grow what grows. Let's let the dice tell us where we succeed and fail. Let's let those experiences, I think there's a lot of meaning baked in there.
Right.
But frankly, it's too valuable a tool to me when I'm thinking about world building. So I like I said, tell me why I am wrong about that, all you DMs who disagree, or tell me why I'm right about that, all you DMs who agree.
Yeah, go and get under the microscope a little, man.
I can't do you guys justice. If he was way off base on the Star Wars thing, then
I feel pretty safe on that one.
Well, if he, you guys will let us know down in the comments. You got anything?
No, I think we did. I think I did. Like, I'm sure there's stuff we forgot to talk about, but no, I think backstory is I think it's good. All right, how do you want to end this one, my friend?
Why don't you just take us on out, however you feel like taking us out, and take us out as though you've just kind of wrapped up an arduous 40-page backstory, and now you're arriving as your level 1 self.
All right, listen up, everyone. I may have gone across the seas and fought and killed Orcus myself and recovered his wand, but now that I am...
Scepter.
That was a wand.
Whatever. Who cares, really?
I guarantee you someone will.
That's true.
But now that I find myself back and I've been taking a week off and find myself back at level 1, I just want to say that, well, though you may be peasants and truly miserable miscreants, and I am basically a god, the world is mostly mine.